Hi everyone, thank you for coming today. My name is Michelle Sanchez. I'm Sustainability Lead at RSHP. We're going to talk today about a subject that I'm very passionate about, and RSHP is keen on leading the way, I guess. So many people don't know that sustainability as a word was first mentioned in the UN back in 1987. And the definition is the balance between environmental, social, and economical impact. So from many years, we as an industry have been really focused on carbon reduction, which is great, but we need to widen our approach to sustainability and see other areas where we also have impact. So I'm not saying that we need to not focus on carbon reduction, but we have to focus on other areas. So I'm going to ask all the panelists to introduce themselves first, and then we'll start with the questions.
Hi, that's loud. I'm Anne Dalzell. I'm a director at Arup, and I've been in building services since 1987 when the word sustainability was coined, so thank you.
Hello everybody, my name's Rob Partridge. I'm a design principal at AKT, and we are structural engineers.
Hi everyone, I'm Mary Liz Ramos. I'm a director with Savills Earth Sustainability Advisory.
Hello. Hello, my name's Gary Grant, Green Infrastructure Consultancy. I'm an ecologist working on greening the urban environment.
Okay, I'm going to start with a question for Marilis. So, from a kind of client and investment perspective, what other parameters linked to the Green Premier do you look at apart from carbon reduction and low running cost?
So it's very interesting when you talk about value, because what a lot of people don't know is when you talk to a valuer, they can't just say, oh, it has a PV panel on it, I'll value it higher. They have to look at evidence that does that. And if they're not gathering the evidence that you need to gather, they might not be able to do it. So there's valuation, but there's also the rise of ESG investing and impact investing. So ESG investing is looking at things like the risk that your property is going to have either now or in the future, and then in taking that into consideration with the value. And then you've got impact investing as well, where you get all of the other things like social value, placemaking, health and well-being benefits, increases in comfort. So those are starting to factor into what you call the Green Book valuation, which works with the Red Book valuation.
Do you think clients are leading on getting more of that value into building? Is it more kind of the tenants are asking for, or the clients are pushing for?
So I think those things, so ESG investing and impact investing, are things that differentiate your product or your property on the market. So a lot of investors are doing that. In addition to the fact that it's just the right thing to do, to consider all of those things in addition to the financials, it's something that companies that want to do the right thing and want to stay ahead of the market are definitely looking at.
I have a question for Anne. So you are a director of a very, very big company that has kind of heads of everything from structural, MEP, sustainability, you name it, our house it. So do you think there is a problem with the silo mentality in the industry where consultants are appointed for like set of responsibilities and they can't or won't go beyond that? Do you think a company like yours, it's kind of easier for you to kind of have a bit more flexibility on discussing different subjects and not just what you're appointed for?
That's a very good question. So prior to being what I am now, so a director which is in doing decarbonisation of buildings, I've been a building services engineer for 37 years. Building services engineers cannot be siloed, right? We're always fighting our way into the facades, the structure, the water management, probably a bit of biodiversity as well, just to mix it up a bit. So I don't think that siloing, well, it doesn't work. That's one thing. But I agree that collaboration between disciplines is easier when you're in one company, only because it's easier to get hold of them. So we all collaborate well. The best projects I've worked on haven't necessarily been projects where Arup have done all the disciplines. It's been where the team has been set to collaborate and where that kind of feeling of working together has been used. I think it's a really good point. You were talking about, is there a liability or maybe even an appointment kind of barrier to working in silos? And I think that probably liability-wise, no. I don't think anyone is ever working to the denigration of someone else's discipline. So I think we're all trying to do the best and optimise things together. And in appointment terms, I'd like to think, this has always been true, that we should spend a bit more time thinking and less time actually fixing things that we've got wrong. I obviously never get anything wrong myself, but you know what I mean. And so actually spending a bit more time at the beginning of the design process and doing that collaborative optioneering out of the silos is a really important part of that delivery. That's always been the case. I'd kind of like to think it's all about collaboration, not necessarily about disciplines.
But in my experience, there's more collaboration when the client is more inclined to it. So we have, I have experience with clients that don't want the consultants to talk to each other, and experience with clients they just want everyone sitting on the table. So how can we change that mentality for clients to?
Yeah, I think that's really important as well. And funnily enough, I have also worked with architectural teams that have seemed to want to keep people in things. So I think we all know now that you cannot layer everything on top of each other and hope to get the best out of everyone. We need to be working together because we need to cut down on the amount of stuff that we're putting into buildings or into projects to get the optimum output from them. So that's really important. And then the other part about it is that we probably, as a design team, should engage with each other more to work out what the client might need that would help them make the right decisions. So if we've got an engagement individually on particular projects, but we can see the benefits in doing something that joins maybe two different disciplines in a way that they aren't appointed to do, we should suggest it and let the client decide.
That's a good point. I have a question for Rob. So we have seen structural engineers, I think, leading the wave in embodied carbon reduction in the last probably 5 or more years. Do you think, I feel from all other disciplines, structural engineers is quite set. Do you think you have a potential to also impact other areas of sustainability? Like from the top of my head, I think of climate resilience, but it might be more.
Okay, thank you. So it's very nice of you to say that structural engineers are leading the way in terms of embodied carbon reduction.
My personal opinion.
Thank you. But I am going to challenge that slightly, actually, and I'll be interested to see if you agree in the audience. I do think that the industry has got slightly lazy when it comes to the design and evaluation of embodied carbon in buildings. I feel as though we have got quite formulaic. We tend to lead a very linear process, and it is very much an automated process. We go through the detailed design, we do the quants, we work out the carbon, and then we have a number, and then it goes into the planning submission. I feel as though we've lost that art of design, right? We should be taking the data and interpreting it a lot more. It should be going around lots more of the kind of usual design iterations that we all know and love, but I feel as though we've slightly lost that. So I think we need to shake that off. That's the first thing. But in answer to your question, yes, I think the discipline of structural engineering and all engineering, for that matter, has definitely broadened. So, for example, we now need to think far more about materials and material science. When I was at university, we were taught about how to design structural frames from a predefined set of materials: concrete, steel, brick, etc. Now, we are asking our structural engineers to actually design the material, right? So we have to design the material first and then design structural systems. That is a massive shift, a massive shift. And I think the other thing, to pick up on your point about climate resilience, is that I think all engineers are now starting to think more and more about the way the building or infrastructure links to the microclimate around. So I think structural engineers used to design buildings very much from the outside in. We were given a geometry, right, and we made a framework within that geometry. That's not the way we approach it now. We look at, the shape of the building, how the building should reflect the other buildings around it, its relationship with the ground. The cladding, going back to Anne's point, the envelope is structure, right? Engineers have to get this in their head. The envelope is structure, and it is one of the most important parts of a building, because we need to be designing that envelope to cope with 100 years plus of climate change. Heating, pressure, wind loads, flooding, rain, all of those things. That's very important. And then that links to the microclimate outside and pedestrian comfort, a whole other subject, which then links to my favorite topic, which is water management, which Gary and I were discussing earlier, because I'm not hearing much conversation, debate, or innovation about how we deal with water. Everybody talks about carbon capture and cement-free concrete and all of that good stuff, but I don't hear water being mentioned. So I thought that'd be a good handover to Gary.
Perfect. So Gary, I always had the feeling that biodiversity in our industry is more like a ticking box exercise to comply with a BREEAM certification. People see a college's appointment as something that goes into planning, and then if we call you back, it's only if something has gone really wrong. And I know we have the new regulation that would hopefully change that point of view. But I always felt like ecologists should be part of the design team. Do you think, or can we keep this from happening? Do you think there's a way of approaching biodiversity without being a ticking box exercise, and how we improve in that?
Yes, of course. So we now have biodiversity officially on the agenda, don't we? We've got biodiversity net gain, we've got targets. It's something that people have to show that they're aware of and they're dealing with. But we do need to remember that biodiversity is soil, water, and vegetation. So there's a conversation about water management within that, ideally. So that's a collaborative item on the agenda. We've also heard about microclimates, and it's worth noting that now we have very sophisticated modeling software which can help us to look at the microclimate and include the impact of soil, water, and vegetation. And this morning I've been in a meeting looking at the modeling of comfort and microclimate and buildings, when people were ignoring the presence of trees and vegetation and arguing, for instance, that green roofs have no impact whatsoever on microclimate and water management. And that's not true. We've got data now to show that the habitats that we could be creating on buildings, like green roofs, green walls and so on, do have an impact on water management. They could have even a more profound impact if there was a deliberate attempt to integrate that design rather than it being seen as a stick-on addition. So there's a lot of interesting conversations that people will be having about what kind of green roofs, how deep the substrates will be, what kind of vegetation you'll have to meet biodiversity net gain objectives, and then beyond that, microclimate, water management, and so on. So I see a lot of potential here in the future to collaborate along these lines, and it's very interesting. Of course, we'll tick the boxes for BREEAM. and biodiversity net gain and so on, but we can do even more than that. So I think you'll be seeing a lot more soil, vegetation and water in the built environment in the future if we carry on along those lines.
So another question for Marilis.
Before we go on to my question, I just wanted to say that something I like to say about sustainability is that it's a shared responsibility. So what I'm hearing here is great because it means that we shouldn't be afraid to breach those boundaries. Like, don't stay in your court. So structural engineers need to know a little bit about biodiversity. Mechanical and electrical engineers need to know a lot about a lot of things. And sustainability consultants actually need to know about everything to be able to knit it together in the most effective way.
Yeah, you're completely right. Like, the more we collaborate, the better the project will be at the end. And we all have a better result if we work together.
And clients need to give us space and the fees to do that collaboration, I think.
Exactly. So with that, we always have BREEAM in lead, which look at a more like holistic approach to sustainability. They're going through an update this year, both because they need to, and we know both of them have a kind of more points or more credits going through energy than anything else. So it is holistic, but maybe it's not balanced or whatever. But in our practice, we see an increased interest in combining different certifications. So going for, if it's an office building, for example, going for a BREEAM, a WELL, and neighbors fit well. There's like a range of it. And in 10 years ago, clients choose one and go with that one. But now there's a kind of go for everything. Do you think there's a value on having like a lot of certifications, or is there an increase in that?
So I think certifications are interesting because you don't really want to carpet bomb your building with like all of the certifications you can find. I think it's about when you're developing in the early stage of the development process, it's about deciding what your story is. So what is this building going to do? Who is it going to be for? And what are they going to value? So BREEAM and LEED are great. They're holistic, but they may not go as far as meeting the net zero carbon agenda. So just because you have a BREEAM rated building doesn't mean it's going to automatically meet net zero targets. So you have to be very careful and you have to know what certifications do what thing. And I think a lot of our commercial clients are going for a cocktail of these measures. So they go for BREEAM or LEED. They both do kind of very similar things for the holistic piece. They go for neighbors because that's what's going to give you your net zero achievement. And then they may layer that on with, say, a WELL standard or a fit well standard, which then addresses occupier need for that satisfaction of their employee piece. Or they could go for air rated, which improves air quality. So it really depends on what story you're crafting, and each building is unique.
So there is definitely a trend for tenants to ask for WELL or fit well.
Yeah. Well, definitely, because those are differentiators, and a lot of people are looking for that. There's a business case for certain certification things that people want to build on, and there are certain certifications that let you look better for investors as well. So it is about picking the right mix of them, but not necessarily just going blindly for whatever is out there.
Yeah. Okay. I wanted to ask you, Anne, so in my opinion, you're kind of one of the biggest advocates for decarbonization buildings. I'm going to say it bluntly there. And I think there's a lot of arguments out there of not having a holistic approach because we don't have the resources to cover everything, and we have to maybe just focus on decarbonization and focus on net zero and just kind of tackle that, achieve that, and then we'll see what we do after that. In my opinion, you can advocate a bit of resources to other things to kind of push the agenda as well. As I said in the beginning, like, I'm not saying that we shouldn't look at carbon reduction. I think it's great, but I think as an industry, we already have a path and we understand how to get there. And in other areas, we don't. Like, they were saying water management. I feel water management is another area that we're just ticking a box for a brand and just leave it like that. And water is such an important resource. So do you think it would be best to just allocate our biggest resources to net zero and decarbonization, or do you think we can actually balance it, or is there a project that, depending on project and client?
We've got to balance it, right? You knew that I was going to say that. So my example is, if you could have the nicest net zero building in the world, but if it doesn't deliver, social value, water management, biodiversity, it is completely unsustainable, I'm afraid. Nobody's going to want to go in it. Nobody's going to enjoy it. It doesn't deliver anything for society. So carbon is not everything. Even though I'm quite proud of what you said about my decarbonisation skills, I'd like to think I look a little wider than that. I think what we've been hearing earlier about, as a building services engineer, as I said, we've got fingers in every pie, but we obviously get the benefit from, structural mass. We get the benefit from microclimate provided via biodiversity outside the building. We get a massive benefit now in terms of water management, in that the building services are the last port of call for attenuation. So that they're, if you look at the water hierarchy, the tank in the basement is the rubbish solution. So building all these things in is very necessary. And we can prove that there are, funnily enough, carbon benefits and cost benefits and time benefits in layering these things over each other, but delivering the benefits between them.
And it's not just about getting the benefits these days. I think there are sites in the UK where you won't be able to get access to water. It's the same as not being able to have access to the grid. So it may not just be about convincing people to do the right thing. It may be a choice of being able to develop on a site or not, if you don't think about these things.
Absolutely. I think that's very true. And I think finding new ways to provide utility in areas where they're short, and actually, conserving utility might not only be for that site, but actually for, a just transition for other people nearby as well. So it's kind of all joined up. We need to think outside the red lines, definitely.
Yeah, I completely agree. And what you said at the beginning, like a building that it's net zero is not necessarily sustainable. It's very keen to kind of everyone to understand sustainability needs to be holistic and needs to be broader than that. With that, I segue to a question for you. We were talking about, before this discussion, about the lack of knowledge in the industry and how can we uplift the knowledge of everyone in regards of all of these things. I think it's kind of clear then for everyone that it has to do with sustainability in any aspect, that they need to understand net zero, they need to understand what embodied carbon is, operational carbon, how that is calculated, everything else. But we need to understand other aspects as well. What do you think would be the best way to bridge that gap?
Okay, knowledge and education. This is a difficult question. I've got two answers. The first one is that I think that the knowledge of what's out there needs to come from within. It needs to come from within our organizations. And I'm gonna link this to an imperative of sustainability that we haven't really talked about yet, which is learning. Learning from our buildings. Structural engineers, just to talk about my profession, are particularly bad at this. Building services engineers have been doing it for a long, long time, collecting data. We maybe not. We really haven't. But we're starting to. We're starting to build prototypes. We are testing timber. No one's got a bloody clue how timber works, I'll be totally honest with you, but now we do. Because we're testing it in fire. We're testing it in terms of dynamics. We're actually gathering all of that data. We're doing the same things with existing structures, especially when we're pushing them really hard in terms of, adding another 10 stories to a 1960s frame, which is usually a problem with the foundations. So, especially in London, how much is that building going to sink? Does anybody know? It's Anybody know how much that building's going to sink when you add 10 stories? It will, but it probably won't fail, but it will sink. So we need to install all of these kind of testing equipment on these buildings and actually monitor them. I appreciate that was left field. I'll try and answer the question properly now. I think we need to talk to our clients, and I think we need to suggest to our clients to not be too worried about going out of the UK to look for other consultants. The world is very small. We, all of us lot, work around the world, right? Why aren't we bringing that expertise into the UK? There's some really good sustainability consultants out there, by the way.
That's a really good point. So we are running out of time. We only have 30 minutes to this very wide discussion. So if you have any questions, we're going to be here after for a while if you want to, but we're not going to have like a Q&A section. So I want to wrap up the session with everyone just answering, how do you think we need to push clients to get for a more holistic approach? So Annalise.
So at Savills, we promote this kind of new role in a way, which is that of a sustainability champion. So we are, as an industry, reasonably siloed at the moment, and that needs to change. So what we've been offering our clients and what they've been asking us for help with is to have that one person who brings the team together, just specifically looking at ESG and sustainability and making sure that everyone around the team knows what the goals are, what the targets are, even setting them in the first place, so that everyone is coming along in that journey and looking at the same end goal and working towards the same outcomes. So that's where we need to be, I think, as design teams. And maybe in the future, that role is no longer going to be needed. But I think everyone needs to have, like I said earlier, that shared responsibility for getting to sustainability outcomes.
I think we just need to be honest with our clients, and we need to talk a simple language. There's a lot of fluff in the world of sustainability when I hear, not this panel, but other panels. And our clients, they haven't got the knowledge we've got. They're lost. They don't honestly know what to do. So we need to talk in a simple and honest language to tell them what they need to do.
I had a really good idea and I've forgotten it because... Right, so a couple of things. One, I think the education piece is absolutely critical. Helping our clients understand the challenge in a way that affects them is really key. Another thing that one of my particular clients has always said to me, which I think is valuable, is that it depends who we're talking to. So some of our clients do not give two hoots about, kilograms of carbon or something, unless it hits them in their pocket or in their reporting. So actually being clear about the value to them of doing these things, sometimes in pounds rather than in kilograms, is really important. So I think that's probably my key takeaway.
Gary?
I want to talk about the learning and more specifically the monitoring of the situation. So with biodiversity, very little is ever done to look at what's happened. So there's a lot of work done to get planning permission, but follow up very little. Now, biodiversity net gain is requiring 30-year commitment and monitoring, and I think that there's some hope for using up-to-date techniques. So, for instance, you can use remote sensing and artificial intelligence. So you might want to go to the Gentian stand to find out a bit more about that. And also, I've been fascinated by the work that UCL have done, where they've been monitoring bat activity in the Olympic Park using microphones, which combined with computers, can automatically identify all of the species that are flying around, when they flew, where they were, and upload that to a website. So I think we can do a lot more to monitor biodiversity using these smart methods in the future, and get that automatic feedback. And then added to that, we've also got this citizen science arena as well, where people are taking pictures, sending them to experts, but I think increasingly artificial intelligence is going to be able to identify a lot of those images. So I see quite a role for technology there in monitoring and hopefully getting people engaged with biodiversity as well. So yeah, learning, monitoring, a lot more to be done, and of course the feedback loop to the designers and others that are involved in deciding what we should be doing with new schemes as well. Yeah.
And I think my final idea to kind of push the industry would be to be more open about our errors. I think we as an industry are very good giving awards to the best building for this best thing, but we're not really good at publishing saying this didn't work as we thought it would be. We'll make it better next time, just doing this, and that. So being more open as an industry for that, I think it would be kind of open and be more open about that would be a key as well. So thank you very much for hearing us today. And RSHP will be organizing more events around this subject. So just keep an eye on our social media and our website if you want to be involved. Thank you.